In this short video, we're going to talk about how formalizing an argument can reveal its problematic form. So we're going to look at a bad argument that's not intuitively obviously bad. Nevertheless, it's a bad argument. We're going to see how when we strip it down to its formal character, we'll see quite clearly what's wrong with it, and then we'll compare it to some intuitively obvious errors in reasoning. So here's the argument. It goes something like this. You should take a course which teaches you about morality and ethical decision making. So that's the main contention. If ethicists were always honest, then you could afford to be ignorant about moral questions and could simply consult the experts when you had a moral problem. But the problem is there are dishonest ethicists, and so you must understand your own moral decision making. You can't rely on the experts. And the best way for you to learn about ethics and morality is to take a course. So remember, the main contention here is that you should take an ethics class. And the argument is, if ethicists were always honest, you could afford to be ignorant and just consult the experts. But the problem is, there are dishonest experts, and so you have to figure this stuff out for yourself. And the best way to do that is to take an ethics class. So that's the argument, and intuitively that there's something appealing there. Obviously it's a good idea to know something about ethics and moral judgment. So why not take a class? Okay, so this argument is invalid. The argument itself has the form of a classic fallacy, and we'll look at how that's the case shortly. So first we're going to break the argument up a little bit. We'll introduce some variables and talk about how they work. But the core of the argument comes down to this. If ethicists were always honest, then one wouldn't need to know about moral philosophy. But here is and. It's not always the case, or it's not the case that ethicists are always honest, not P. Therefore, in conclusion, it's not the case that one does not need to know about moral philosophy, not Q. So there's some convolution here when we look at Q and not Q. So that gets a little bit complicated here. But essentially this is what we have in this previous slide. This is what the argument amounts to. Right away we can see that if we just strip out the content here and replace the declarative sentences with variables, that we have this argument form, and this is the classic failed argument form known as denying the antecedent. So in order to understand what denying the antecedent is, let's take an intuitive version of the bad argument form. So, for example, if I said to you, if I run a marathon, then I'll be tired, and I didn't run a marathon, I shouldn't conclude that therefore I'm not tired. So if you look at the slide, you'll see that this is the same argument form. If P, then Q, not P, therefore not Q. In this common sense case, it's easy to see why it's a faulty argument, because there are so many counterexamples. I could be tired for a variety of other reasons. So just because I didn't run a marathon doesn't mean necessarily that I'm not tired. I could be tired from having, I don't know, worked on building a wall, or I could run a half marathon.